think we're live. Well, welcome everybody who is watching at home to this Fireside Chat. My name is Jon Oster from Toradex. I'm the principal security architect for Toradex and Horizon software products. And I'm very happy to be joined here this afternoon by Burkhard Stubert. You might know Burkhard from his very excellent Substack, Better Built by Burkhard. You might know him because you are one of the many software developers that has been helped over the years by his advice and consulting. He's got many years of experience in the embedded industry, building products, building UIs, and just generally is a fantastic person to talk to about anything in the embedded development business. Burkhard, welcome.
Thank you, Jon, for the introduction, and hello to everyone from near Munich in Germany. I'm Burkhard Stubert, and I've been building embedded devices and especially HMIs for them for the last, I think, 20 years by now. Oh, I'm getting old. And especially, so I've played a major role in building HMIs for harvesters, actually two sugar beet and maize harvesters for excavators, dumpers, metal sheet bending machines, and some other things, and even some infotainment systems. And while doing that over the last year, I actually built a Linux system more or less compliant with the CRA, with the Cyber Resilience Act, for a customer. And I noticed, that is so difficult to do. And even for someone who knows a little bit about how to build a Linux system with Yocto, who has done that a couple of times, but there are a lot of things which are really hard, and especially for smaller or medium-sized companies, I would say that's a tricky thing to do. And that's how I'm writing about the Cyber Resilience Act and trying building a public course, a training course for it, and then eventually also a Linux system that I can give to customers and say, well, that's the very foundation. You can take it from here. From here, it's then specific to this or that customer. So that's how I
think that's a great place to start from. So I couldn't agree with you more that I think a lot of the CRA's requirements are potentially very, very difficult. Of course, Toradex's mission is embedded, made easy. And that's something that we're also really interested in trying to do, and that's been my focus for the past little while. I guess I should maybe also list a little bit of my background. Before I joined Toradex, I worked in the automotive industry, and I have worked in writing and developing standards in secure software update systems in critical and safety critical contexts. So this is also, for me, an area that I've been familiar with since quite some time before the CRA went into effect. But now that it is in force, I think people are starting to really realize the impact that the CRA is going to have on product development and these new obligations that have come up. Burkhard, you've written a couple of posts recently starting to walk people through what the CRA actually demands of manufacturers. And I thought maybe we could start today with maybe the requirements around integrity and encryption, and what may be the challenges you've faced there. Can I ask you first to maybe tell us what the CRA says and what your view of how to meet the requirements for integrity and encryption?
Tricky question. So the CRA is pretty long, but the core thing are the I think it's 13 essential requirements for related to product properties, and the 7 essential requirements related to vulnerability handling. And the first ones, the product properties, are things like integrity protection, confidentiality protection. So with integrity protection, you have to make sure that say the bootloader, the Linux kernel, the root file system you put on the system is really the official one from you as a manufacturer, and not something someone else has tampered with and is trying to get access to the data on your system. Or confidentiality protection is obviously about keeping your sensitive data, like say on keeping that private. On a harvester, for example, you have a database with the contact details of farmers. You have the operational data for the billing to the farmers. You know where the fields are and so on. So that's a lot of sensitive data. And even you as a manufacturer have a lot of intellectual property on the system. And that's the things which you must somehow secure and make sure that it doesn't get into the wrong hands.
And this, I think, really is an important point about the CRA. The CRA does bring with it a lot of new requirements. Nobody would deny that. But I would also, and feel free to disagree with me here, but I think that a lot of manufacturers, if they are already following kind of modern best practices for development, are likely already meeting or are very close to already being able to meet the CRA's requirements. Now,
that's a big if.
That's a big if, and that really is a big if. I mean, I think we both know our industry. It's certainly the case that often, especially small and medium sized businesses that are producing embedded products, especially high value, low volume embedded products, haven't really adopted development practices like CI, secure development, integrating software updates into workflows. So there's a lot of devices coming out that I think the manufacturers sometimes assume they're going to be able to just release one golden version of the firmware, and they hope that they won't have to update it over the lifetime of the product.
No, well, that would be a big mistake, because software evolves, and every modern system and we are talking embedded devices with typically a Linux operating system on it, and say 150 to 200 packages, different software packages. They all evolve, and they will all have vulnerabilities in them at some point in time. I think there's never a point in time where there are no vulnerabilities in a system. And if you just look at the Linux kernel, you probably have 400 to 500 open vulnerabilities in, well, at least not maybe
even
not
in
latest
LTS
version, but in the version just
Yeah.
before it, and it's totally normal, and you have to find ways how to deal with that. So, and it's not getting better. So,
have you ever heard? There's this. I think it's an Arthur C. Clarke quote. They said, "Any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic." I have a little twist on that quote. I would say any sufficiently out-of-date software is indistinguishable from malware.
yeah, well, that's probably the security expert speaking in you.
Well, I think I can make a strong case for it, and you can try this at home if you like. Try booting up a vanilla unpatched, I don't know, Ubuntu 12.04 or Windows 7 machine and exposing it to the internet, and see how long it takes.
No, well, they are all end of support for long, so you shouldn't do that.
You most certainly shouldn't.
Yeah.
And yet I've
banks
certainly
are
seen
still,
embedded systems that are put on the market with Linux kernels that are 7 years old.
Yeah, I had the case, and it's just 2 years ago, where it was building, or I was helping to build the driver terminal of an excavator, and we used a terminal from one of the most well-known manufacturers for driver terminals. So everyone has seen these, I'm pretty sure. And it was still running on, no, it wasn't even, was it Donfell? I think, 3.1. No, it was one before, it was 2.7. So exactly, it was 2.7, Yocto 2.7. And that was already, when we started the project, it was, I think, 1.5 to 2 years out of support. And they are still using it, so they are not upgrading it. And this is exactly the problem. So I have seen last year and even this year, I've seen embedded devices that were built with Yocto 1 point something. Most of you probably don't even remember that version, and it's in a vending machine which has a payment system, a payment module. So where it would be really important that you have a good level of security, and try to update these companies have the problem that they can't update their devices anymore.
So that, I think, is a good start for maybe talking about some of the motivations for why the CRA was enacted, and in particular, there are a remarkable percentage, let's say, of the concrete requirements in the CRA relate to software updates. It has a lot to say about that you must offer software updates, how long you must offer them for, a lot of specific functional requirements of the software update system. I'll quote chapter and verse a little bit, but I wanted to talk about why briefly, and I will just share a little slide here. This is one of my favorite academic studies. It's from about 10 years ago now, but I think it has some important lessons to take. This is a study that surveyed ordinary people, one cohort of ordinary people and a cohort of security experts, about what are the most important practices for staying safe online. And if you look at this, the number one response from the experts is update your dang software, but it barely registers with end users.
Yeah, exactly.
And I think we can all relate to this sometimes, when your laptop is nagging you for an update, or your smart TV or whatever, you have a strong instinct to click maybe later. And certainly if those nags weren't there, you probably would never update some of these things at all. But this reality is what the CRA hopes to address in update systems, I think. And I'll just click away this slide for now.
And it will not only nag you, but the important thing to understand is that the preferred way is automatic updates, automatic security updates, at least, with an opt-out option. So yes, you can opt out, and say, okay, I want to have some say in when it's installed, the security update is installed, but you can't postpone it forever. So at some point, say after 3 times postponing it, you will only have the option install it now or tonight. And then it's installed, because it's important to get the updates out.
And okay, I'm gonna share this screen one more time, because I think it's important for people to see what the exact language is here that requires this. So these are directly quoted primarily from Annex 1 of the Cyber Resilience Act. Products shall ensure that vulnerabilities can be addressed through automatic security updates that are enabled by default. Of course, the updates must be distributed securely, again, in an automatic manner. And like you were just saying, the CRA gets so specific as to say that you have to make them automatic by default, but you also have to give your users freedom to postpone or disable automatic updates. So it goes quite deep into the UX questions, some functional requirements, and details about this stuff. And I think that's utterly fascinating. I think for me as a security person, my background has been in supply chain security and software update system security. It also terrifies me a little bit, because I would argue, and I'll put this slide away for now, I would argue that we see a lot of not very carefulely designed software update systems. I would also point out that an automatic software updater it's just a rootkit that you intended to put there.
Yeah, it's that's the reality, or that's what I see in the field as well. So there are a lot of homegrown update procedures, and I just recently had a customer who was very proud that they implemented their own update mechanism, and I asked them, hey, don't you have better things to do? Just use one of the well-known update mechanisms. So use Mender, use your stuff, Optane, what Toradex is using, use SW update, use Rauk, whatever, but use a thing which is long in the field already, which is well tested by other manufacturers, and don't do it yourself. And there's, I think, an update solution by now for everything, even for the 25 other ECUs in a harvester or tractor that needs updating as well. And that's all solve problems. So don't spend time there, and they will take over the most of the testing for you. So they have to. That's another thing with the CRA. It's the supplier of this software, in this case of the over-the-air update solution. They have to make sure that they are complying with the Cyber Resilience Act, and this involves a lot of testing. Actually, they must do things like fuzz testing. They can't get around that to find security holes, which means some out-of-bound accesses to arrays, some dangling pointers, or some data races between threads, and so on. They have to find these things. Otherwise, if they can't, I know.
On that point, Burkhard, I know you said this is a solved problem, and I'll put on my shameless Toradex plug hat here for a second. I think it is a solved problem with Toradex and Horizon Cloud, but
exactly.
And I know you're a fan of SW Update and Rauk you've used in the past. I would make the case that the security architecture of those systems, and I'd extend that even to Mender and Memfault, isn't where we would like it to be. And I'll maybe just share another slide about this. I think the problem we see with update systems is that The threat model that they consider is entirely too basic. You know, yes, of course, a software update system should include some basic cryptography and signature checks to make sure that you're not installing completely arbitrary software. But there's a much bigger and broader threat model against software update systems that has been well studied for 15, 20 years now. I guess we're getting close to 20 years since the original paper on threats against the Tor software update system was written. Simply checking a signature on a software update package is not an adequate defense. So to give an example,
definitely not.
we really, and I'll throw it back to what I said earlier about any sufficiently old software being indistinguishable from malware. If your security model for the update system involves just making sure that only validly signed system images, firmware images, can be installed, what do you do if an attacker manages to get a legitimate, 1.0 version of your firmware that still has some critical bug in it? That's called a rollback attack in the language of.
Is that a mix and match attack? So I have an update archive with multiple images in it. For each of them, I have a checksum, so I can check the integrity for each of them. But you also need a checksum of all the checksums to make sure that the whole that you can't smuggle in an old image for one of the pieces.
Yeah. Well, so mix and match is usually described as this comes from threat modeling in automotive systems or systems with multiple microcontrollers or ECUs where you might need to have mutually compatible firmware updates. And a mix and match attack generally refers to getting the system to install, let's say, an older version with an older API in one microcontroller and a newer version in another, and cause either bugs or compatibility issues. But I think the fundamental question you're describing, a hash of hashes, something that validates the whole, let's say, the set of packages that might be valid for install, is vitally important. And this is, I think, the thing that people don't understand about software update security. You are not securing the software update package. What you need to secure is the integrity of the repository as a whole. So whenever there's a security system for software updates that relies on a signature of an artifact attached to an artifact, that always sets off alarm bells. But we've been talking for a little while here now, and I think maybe now would be a good time to address some questions from the audience, because I see we've fallen behind a little bit on these, and we've got some interesting ones. I think there's several questions we've got in the queue here about the legalities of it, and maybe we can pivot to that later. I think this one is an interesting one. I'm scared of bootloader updates. Do I really have to do this? Let's see if we
can. Depends how long. It depends what functionality the bootloader provides. There are bootloaders who can do an update or who have a network connection. And now if you hear network connection, you immediately know, okay, there will be security issues with a network connection eventually. There always are. So you will have to update them. If you take, say, a bootloader could do an update of the whole system over network. If you take that out, your risk is definitely reduced. But maybe that.
But is it eliminated?
not eliminated. I said reduced, and I did it on purpose. Well, there are some. It's a lot of code in a bootloader. It's not simple software, not at all. And you can do so many things wrong. Just the wrong configuration in the build, and you blow up your complete chain of trust. And so there is many machines live for at least 15 years or 20 years. So can you guarantee that there will never be a vulnerability, an exploitable vulnerability in a bootloader for 15 years? Forget it. You will have to do bootloader updates. But the nice thing is, with at least for eMMC storage, they all come with 2 copies of the bootloader. So you can use an A/B strategy, and that's mandated by the eMMC specification that you have 2. And if one is broken, it automatically switches to the other one, which is cool. So you should really have 2 and not switch into the void. And you can easily flip between the 2 if one is compromised. And
that comes in the ROM code of the SoC that uses that feature. Yeah.
So
yeah. And I think that's maybe the key point in answering this question. Do I really have to do this?
Eventually, yes.
The CRA says if you have a vulnerability, you must patch it. A known exploitable vulnerability.
So check U-boot in the National Vulnerability Database, and you will know you'll have to do it.
Exactly. So this is the thing.
It's not.
You can try. You can hope that you don't run into a vulnerability that is relevant in your product's security context. But hope is usually not a good thing to build a business on. And maybe I'm just going to share this one more slide here. What happens if you don't comply with the CRA? Well, this is a big one. The EU likes to do this in their big regulatory packages. You see that in the GDPR, for example, or the Digital Markets Act. The fundamental enforcement mechanism are very, very large fines that can get that are based on a percentage of global annual turnover for the company as a whole. And, we see this with the GDPR, companies that are sort of willfully out of compliance and think they can just delay and avoid often end up with a very nasty surprise. A few months ago, for example, Uber got hit with, I think, a 240 million euro fine. The numbers get so big, it's hard to remember exactly how many hundreds of millions. But the same kinds of mechanisms apply here. And so this is the big thing the CRA is doing. It lists these requirements and puts a big stick behind them.
Yeah, if you violate any of these, you are up to these fines. But I still think the fines or penalties shouldn't be your biggest motivation in satisfying the essential requirements, because what you also face is damages. Financial damages, because maybe your devices are damaged, or maybe you even harmed your users financially or even bodily. You never know, or reputational damage. And that's damages can also occur if you as a manufacturer mess up your update, and then suddenly your harvesters have to stop, and that's a really big damage. If in the 6 weeks you typically have for the harvest, your harvester stands still for, say, a day, then some very angry farmers will come with their pitchforks and make sure that you get your update right. And that's And that can even that's actually a case where it's no bad intention. It's just human that there is a bug in your update mechanism, and it even happened to CrowdStrike, for example. They had a buggy update, and they actually brought down 8.5 million PCs. And they took down Delta Airlines for nearly a week, which is a huge damage, and it's just a messed up update where they didn't check their out of bounds conditions, and it's
And
not
this is
even
why I'll
only
say
their
in
fault what
Horizon,
could go on there, but yeah.
The first thing we worry about for
Yeah.
software updates is reliability.
Yeah,
You know,
exactly.
you have to build in, I mentioned rollback as a threat, but automatic rollback in the case of a failed update is also an important feature of a software update system. And in general, tolerance of the update system to power cuts and things like that. Resilience is vitally important, especially as you get to large fleets. So that's something we've always tried to do pretty heavily, and kind of make available just out of the box into Horizon. We have.
Can I?
Yes, of course.
Quick remark. I always like to joke, especially at the beginning of projects. The only thing you have to get working reliably is your over-the-air update. Everything else you can put, you can update incrementally after that. And
Burkhard, I've been shouting this into the wilderness for going on 10 years now.
There's a fantastic example, Volkswagen, when they built their first electric car, the E3, the ID3, and they really had to put about 30,000 cars on the parking place because the software wasn't working, and bonus, the over-the-air update wasn't working. So they had to go from car to car and manually update 30,000 cars. That's fun. So get that right and and test it. That's the first thing that you should implement on a system. And then you can use it whenever you update your system during development with a new version. So you eat your own dog food, you test your own stuff, and that's important. Then you know after a year when you release your product, or even after 2 years, you know you can be sure it's working. Say at least in nearly all cases. There may be a corner case that you missed, but that won't kill you in the end.
And I think this is something that once you get a taste of a really good, ergonomic, easy to use software update system as an integrated part of your development flow, it really makes your life easier. I mean, how much time have we all spent doing a Yocto build, putting a device into recovery mode, using UUU to flash, or copying it to an SD card and putting it in and using distribute? How many hours of our life have we spent on that? When you have an update system where you can, integrate it into your build, dog fooding the update system you're going to use in production, send that image out and have it automatically install on your device and your test board, or in a test farm if the device happens to be across the world, it is a really transformative difference in your development workflows.
Yeah, it makes you sleep better.
Yeah. We have some more questions that I want to get to because there's a fairly big queue. And I think this is an important and interesting one. The CRA is officially in effect, but not all of the provisions are in effect yet. And we have a question here from Matthias. If we produce and sell another batch in 2028 of a device that we originally developed in 2024, do these devices then have to comply with the CRA requirements? I will say, and I'll be happy to elaborate on and justify this, I will say, yes, you do. Would you agree, Burkhard?
Yes, with a very, very small way out. that's if you pull the support before 11 December 2027, that's when the penalties are going live. If you pull support of your product before that, then you can avoid it. So you can.
But this specific question says if we produce and sell another batch in 2028, and this is the key thing that makes it impossible.
Now it's getting interesting. As long as they do they have what is the term? Substantial modifications, I think. If they have substantial modifications, then the support goes on, then they fall under the CRA. If there are no substantial modifications, so we have to define what substantial modifications are.
So I mean, we're getting right into the minutiae of this, but I think you're focusing on the wrong part here, because
definitely
the language of the CRA imposes obligations when you place a product on the market, and placing a product on the market under European Union consumer law is a specific legal term with a specific meaning.
Okay.
And you can look in the EU Blue Book to get the definition of this. But placing a product on the market always applies to an individualized product. And the Blue Book very specifically says that definitionally, a product cannot be said to have been placed on the market before it's produced. So if you produce in 2028 a batch of a product, no matter when it was designed.
Okay, yeah.
That product was placed on the market in 2028. It doesn't matter if there were modifications or not. If you produce the product in 2028, you are placing it on the market at the earliest in 2028, and all of the obligations.
Yeah, then you're absolutely right. I read that slightly wrong, so my mistake here. Yeah, so if you put it on the market before December 27, then you still have the option to pull support at that time, and then you have to think what substantial modification means. But if you place it on the market after December 27, then you have to comply with the CRA fully.
Exactly. And placing the key thing, and this is something I misunderstood at the initially, and our in-house counsel had to explain it to me very slowly. It does not matter if you are selling the exact same product with the exact same SKU that you have been selling since you initially released it in 2013. If you have manufactured even one of them after the effective date of the CRA, it automatically must be compliant.
Now that's even stronger than I thought. So you're just saying that you have been producing this device for already before 28, and then you sell it after in 28 and later, and you're producing new batches of it, and that means it's a new release. Does that also mean that the support period starts from fresh?
It does. Cool. These are difficult requirements, but that is the reality of the legal language in the Act, and I think that maybe takes us to this question from Kobayashi. I feel like software companies are scaring us with the CRA to buy consultancy and new software. What are the minimum requirements? Well, we've been trying to broadly cover that last question, but this idea, okay, software companies are just sort of scaring us to buy consultancy and new software. I will say, as a security professional, I do think that the marketplace of companies selling security solutions, especially anybody selling you a security solution that you're going to bolt on after the fact, it's true. There are some bad products out there, but I don't think that these companies are being alarmist. This the CRA is really fundamental and important legislation that imposes major new requirements. And of course, every consultancy would like to help you get there for the low cost of, 10, 20, 70, 80, 150, 500,000 euros, whatever the scope of your product happens to be. There are consultancies that will help you for whatever cost.
Absolutely.
But I don't think you can sort of just shrug your shoulders and say, well, I don't have to make any major changes. I'll figure it out when the regulation arrives. You have to be preparing now.
Yeah, and you have to do it now. So otherwise it will be too late. I think it's not. For me, the CRA is one of the few regulations which makes absolute sense to me. It just improves the quality of your product. So one requirement is to ensure the availability of essential and basic functions if the device is under attack, or if something, it's in the end, if something goes wrong. So on a harvester, that would mean that you can still harvest things. That's your most basic and essential functionality on a harvester. And whether now, say, the telematics unit is still working, it doesn't matter. Whether say the diagnostic application doesn't work anymore because it crashes, doesn't matter. You can still cut your maize or dig out your sugar beets. That's the essential functionality, and that's, in the end, it makes your product more robust, more reliant. You have a higher uptime. So that's all good things, and it's just, I would say, it's a side effect of security here. And so it makes a lot of sense. GDPR, for example, there are some things which I will never understand. So it should apply only to companies like Meta or so, which make their money with advertising. For example, I don't make money with advertising. I don't even have anything on my website, but I still have to comply with it.
Have a little cookie.
That rant. So otherwise, I won't stop anymore. So it really makes sense for me. It makes your product better. It's not scaring. You should really do something. It's if you want to. There's one good example which of an attack. So it's the can injection attack on the. It started with Toyota cars, and it takes a thief just 1.5 minutes to drive away with your car. And it's not just Toyota, it's all the well-known brands. They just what they do is they smash your headlight, get to the CAN wires, pull out the CAN wires, plug in a device for $10, and that device sends the messages that unlock the door and that start the car. And it takes,
because CAN is historically an unauthenticated bus, and it's a ring bus. So yeah,
exactly. It's a bus, and once you get your hands on the CAN bus, there's no protection anymore. It's amazing.
And this is a really interesting thing that I think maybe leads into a topic that we haven't covered yet, but I think is vitally important. The CRA, we've talked a lot about the obligations that it imposes, but a really important mechanism in the CRA to understand is the risk assessment and threat modeling aspect. So the CRA takes heavy inspiration from other security standards in the space. For example, ISO 21434 in automotive, ISO 62443 for operational technologies, and things like the cyber IoT standard. That's EN ETSI 303. I forget the numbers. But one thing that a lot of these standards have in common is that they include product development practices in the standard, and right at the base of all of the requirements of the CRA is the individualized threat model of your product. So we mentioned, hey, you've got to have automatic updates. Well, what about products that aren't connected to the internet? How are we supposed to do magic and automatically transport bits to a device that has no internet connection? Well, no. So the core of the CRA.
That's
there
enough.
You go.
A USB drive.
You can take that. Yep. You define the threat model of your device, and the measures that you have to take should be tailored to that threat model. And that's a really helpful thing, for one thing. You can first define a threat model that, as long as it's accurate and appropriate, that reduces your responsibility greatly. And especially if you design your product to have certain baseline security measures, your threat model gets a lot easier. So, for example, if you do a correct implementation of Secure Boot all the way from bootloader to rootfs and application code, you will have integrity protection that allows a much easier fulfillment of a threat model. And that, I think, is a vitally important aspect to remember.
Exactly. And you mentioned Secure Boot, and which you need to set up your complete chain of trust. And this is not even mentioned by the CRA. But without a chain of trust, which is somehow protected by hardware, don't do it in software. It won't stand the time. You won't be able to comply with a lot of requirements. You mentioned integrity protection. There's confidentiality protection, and there are secure updates isn't possible. You can't do a secure update. And there are a couple of others. So it's I think the most fundamental thing. And what I like about your offering, your Tordex offering, the Meta Tordex security layer, is you get that ready-made, basically. So you can take it as a manufacturer, and you have the chain of trust. And it's not, by the way, it's not that simple to get that working. So I spent last year.
You have some direct experience with that, I know.
With another SOM maker, which I won't mention here. And you could get the first step working. So checking the bootloader, the integrity of the bootloader. But from then on, it became more and more difficult. And then you have also there was also the problem. Well, the integrity check of the root file system didn't work because the Yocto version was too old, and they didn't have for the SOM. They didn't have the latest Yocto version, not the latest kernel version. You needed some kernel patches for DM Verity to work. So there you go. That's all the factors that play in here.
And I've got a standard slide on this because it's a problem that people face quite often. You have, if I can just pop that up, you have a lot of implementation choices to make, and although SoC vendors do offer the primitives and the hardware support you need, I think it can feel quite complicated. And we got another useful question from Kobayashi here. He says, on ARM, Secure Boot is too complicated compared to Intel. Is it really needed by the CRA? Well, I think we've addressed, is it really needed? And I think this addresses, well, is it actually too complicated? Well, it can be. But this, as Burkhard mentioned, this is something we do, I think, extremely well at Tordex. I dropped a link here about how to do. Oh, I put the wrong slide. This is at rest data encryption, but it's the same layer. If you are implementing either data encryption or secure boot, it's really just a matter of enabling a couple of flags, and for any Tortex module, you will get a built image with everything you need to have a complete chain of trust enabled, and we even print out for you the programming commands you need to flash the keys into fuses and everything like that. And yeah, I mean, this is really a thing that I think if you have to fight with the SOC vendor documentation, make all of the choices yourself, and build an implementation from scratch, it'll slow your product development down. And if you make ill-advised choices, that can really have an impact far down the line. I had an experience once, and I mean, this is something we see a lot at Tortex. People often come to Tortex after having some experience with other SOM vendors. They come to Tortex because they've seen what it's like when you don't have our typical excellent hardware and software support. But they implemented a secure boot system where they used different signing keys for every module.
Yeah, that was yeah. Mm-hmm.
So look, I could probably imagine a very strange threat model where that might be useful, but it's just not. And this is one of these things that maybe it's just a matter of experience, but you want to have somebody who knows what they're doing tell you what the correct the correct baseline way of doing things is, because everything is infinitely configurable here. I dropped a QR code, by the way, to the documentation of our MetaTortex security layer, so you can kind of see just how easy it is. But yeah, this stuff can be easy if you follow the standard path, or it can be really hard. And I mean, I've seen estimates for as was asked here, hey, is the CRA really just about consulting companies selling us more stuff? And I've seen estimates for implementing secure boot chain of trust ranging from 20,000 to 80,000 for a Yocto implementation. And I think that's something that you really should consider when you're looking at what components you're going to choose. And maybe that brings me to
maybe I take over the advertisement for Tortex now from my own experience. So I'm not getting paid for it, by the way. It's really my conviction. Yeah, it's you mentioned the 20 to 80,000 euros for implementing a chain of trust. Well, 80,000 sounds a bit high, 20,000 a bit low, so it's somewhere in between. And but you can also pay a little bit more per each SOM, and you can get that the whole thing from Tortex right away, ready-made. And they are the only ones I know at the moment who really offer that. And that's I think what all hardware vendors should do. They shouldn't tell each OEM, hey, you have to do the same things over and over again. Every manufacturer has to implement secure boot and set up a chain of trust, do a proper over-the-air update solution. And why does everyone has to do the same thing again? So push it towards the source, push it toward the people who give you the BSB, and they should do it once and for all and for everyone. And there should be a really good solution for that. And if it comes from one hand, from people who have done it 100 of times and know exactly what they are doing, then it's much better. And then pay €1 or €2 or €5 more per module and save all the trouble building these solutions yourself. And it's really worth it. And that's the trade-off you should do when you decide about hardware. And there's another one on your slide. Just you mentioned, well, TPM, CAAM, so some modules, some security modules where you can say store keys in a secure way. And if you, for example, now, if you're thinking about developing a system, a device, or even releasing it now, and say you are using a Raspberry Pi 4 compute module, which many people do, you will have one problem. You don't have a TPM, trusted platform module on it. You have nothing where you can safely securely store cryptographic keys. So you have to bolt on a TPM, say over SPI or some other serial interface, and then get the Linux kernel drivers working properly with that end, integrate that in your kernel build and your Linux system, and that's what you have to do then. So you must think about which hardware you select, and it's not only the Raspberry Pi, it's all the cheap Chinese chips you can buy. They don't have, or most of them don't have anything to do secure boot in a truly secure way. And
the Raspberry Pi boot flow, this whole nonsense of starting with the GPU, I have looked at the implementation of trying to implement secure boot with that boot flow. It's not pleasant. But I think you really seized on something that I think will be one of the major economic effects of the CRA.
Yes.
It really incentivizes choosing suppliers, chip vendors, silicon vendors that you really trust, because the CRA doesn't give you any way to offload responsibility to your suppliers. So if you buy, that aforementioned cheap Chinese silicon, and they provide you with a BSP that has a completely forked out of tree kernel, and then there's some vulnerability that you need to patch, and they say, yeah, sorry, we don't support that anymore. It's you who bears all of the cost of that and all of that responsibility. And like we said before, if you get a vulnerability and you can't patch it, your choices are start eating multi-million euro fines, or do a physical recall of your product, probably with a new chip vendor. So it's, I think the CRA really incentivizes choosing your suppliers very carefully.
And Kobayashi put it nicely in the comments. Secure boot is different for every SOC supplier, and it really is a pain in the lower torso. And so it's different for every SOC supplier. And some SOCs don't even have it, so that's the next problem. And so, and it's actually if you think about it, even if it's the same SOC, like say an IMX8M Plus, Verisite implements secure boot this way, so they have some recipes with code to generate the keys and whatever. Toradex does it slightly different. They have the same, but in the end, they implement the same thing, Digi again, and you can take all the other 20 some suppliers for the IMX8M, and they all have implemented that. Why isn't that pushed up to NXP? They should provide it once and for all, and everyone would be happy. So it's their SOC. So it's.
I do have some sympathy for NXP and the low-level silicon vendors here. I have friends and colleagues who work in security teams there, and I do think also, to a certain extent, those silicon vendors would also prefer if there was a really nice, easy standard to follow for cryptographic modules and things like that. But I think the silicon vendors choose to implement low-level things with maximal flexibility. So I mean, I'll take NXP as an example, because many of Toradex's modules are based on NXP processors. With their secure boot support, there's they call it HAB, high assurance boot, and advanced high assurance boot, AHAB. And with AHAB, you have the choice to use simple signing, or you can create a root and then leaf node certificates.
Yeah.
And I can't tell you how many times I've, in the good case, people ask, so which one should I choose? Should I be using leaf certificates? Or in the not so good case, somebody decides, well, we have leaf certificates, so of course we should use them, without understanding the how or why of it. And NXP implemented this feature because they want to have cryptographic agility and flexibility. But it fundamentally depends on software support far downstream from NXP.
Yeah.
So why would you choose a root and leaf architecture? Well, because those certificates are going to be used for different things, but in different stages of boot, or one in the secure world, one elsewhere. But if for that to be effective, you need to make sure that whatever code is reading, parsing that certificate, that it is not just checking whether the signature is valid and the key is listed on the certificate. It's checking all of the X509 extensions and specific subject constraints and things like that within the X509 ecosystem. And that's something that is not implemented anywhere. I have seen it privately. I've seen it inside the automotive industry, where the absolutely massive scale makes it feasible to do these custom implementations. But I have not seen it once outside of the automotive industry. I have not seen it once, somebody using an effective certificate tree that actually checks the appropriate constraints. So in all of those cases, you'd be better off using simple signing.
Exactly. So why for AHAB, why don't they should provide probably 2 or 3 default options. One is simple signing as before. The other is proper implementation of what you just described, and what I don't understand anyway. So, which is too complicated.
That's maybe a bit of a big ask for NXP to try to, and also there's many designs for it, right? So getting all of that into TFA and Opti and U-boot and Grub and whatever other bootloaders and early boot systems.
It's always simple to say it's not our problem, it's the OEM's problem in the end, or someone in between. Just give them clear options. Okay, if you are in this context, simple signing will be okay. In this context, sure, you need something more flexible, more complicated, or more secure, whatever you want to call it. And then this is the solution, the way to go. And otherwise, the third option is you can do whatever you want, but you need default options.
Yeah. I see an interesting question from Rettikalvet here. If I have a simple microcontroller like an STM32FX, how can I implement secure boot? It's not supported by the microcontroller itself. So do I have to do it with software? Do I have to do it with an external TPM? This is a hard question. Do you want to take a stab at it first, or shall I?
No, you go. That's more your domain.
Okay.
I have some ideas, but
I think that, first of all, you can implement it via an external trust source like a TPM. That is not necessarily a very easy path, but you can do it. This is where I think threat model and judgment comes in a lot. many embedded devices will have, an application processor, let's say it's a Toradex SOM, and several other microcontrollers of varying sizes. Now, ideally, you should, in a perfect world, you would implement secure boot and secure updates on all of those microcontrollers. Anywhere where you might have a vulnerability, it should be implemented and protected. But there are alternatives. So depending on the complexity of software that you are implementing inside that microcontroller, you could make a decision to use write once firmware and disable the flashing pins once you've flashed it once. That leaves you with less flexibility, of course, but that eliminates a class of attack because you no longer need to implement secure boot because you have implemented a mitigating control against the software being replaced in the first place. So this may come off as a bit of a weaselly answer, but I really think what you have to do in these cases always is design your threat model in an appropriate way that reflects the level of risk you're willing to accept.
It's roughly what I would have come up with as well. So, and there's maybe, you can, on a microcontroller, you just say you run a firmware bare metal. So basically, you only have the first step in your chain of trust. Some code in EEPROM runs the firmware, like the bootloader on a Linux, complete Linux system. And if you have some secure element on your microcontroller, I don't know, for the SDM, then you could use that to store the public key, like the superroot keys on the IMX processors, and then check the signature of your firmware, and there you go. Or if your microcontroller is connected to a microprocessor, then
you could consider flashing the firmware at every boot. That's
you flash from the microprocessor over to the microcontroller, and you can do the check on the microprocessor. Or could even use, I don't know, ARM Trust Zone. Does the STM32 support ARM Trust Zone? I don't know. Not every Cortex-M does. The one with the double digits, like 33, and so they do it. They have it now. The others don't have it. So yeah,
I'm not sure about those particular chips. And yeah, that option you mentioned of flashing it over from a heavier processor with more security controls. I'll just mention that's a use case that we've really designed for in Horizon. So you can define on your application processor on the Linux system, you can very easily define subsystems and the signed firmwares that need to be distributed to those subsystems, and you can then build up a system where your root of trust kind of comes out of the box in the on the Horizon side, and then gets sent off to the microcontrollers when they boot. And that's something that, again, you can describe in the definition of your device and describe the threat model of the device in such a way that says, okay, so I have a threat that an attacker might physically open up my device and attach some leads to the programming pins of this microcontroller and replace the software on it. My mitigation for that is that on boot up, my application processor is designed to reflash every time. That's a very appropriate and reasonable mitigation. It's not perfect mitigation. Yeah. If I were designing, I don't know, let's say a public an ECU for a train that might be accessible to the public in remote areas without surveillance, I might choose a stronger security measure. But you can always tailor the amount of security you have to build in to this particular needs of of the product.
Yeah.
Another question from Kobayashi. TMP, I'm assuming you mean TPM should be a standard. Is it secure to use a TPM chip, that is a module outside of the SoC, to implement secure boot for Raspberry Pi, for example? So TPM is standard. It is, in fact, a fairly mature standard. TPM 2.0 is the current one, and you can find TPM 2.0 chips that are even high-level FIPS certified. And as for, can you implement secure boot with that? Well, yes, but it does still depend on your on the ROM code of the chip that you are trying to bootstrap it off of. And so if you have some SoC that really doesn't have good support for it out of the box, you're going to find yourself trying to build a security solution from scratch that is really difficult and dependent. And
the way
it's always better to go for the built-in features on the SoC.
The way out would be to use Raspberry Pi 5 compute module, which has or TPM on board, and all the secure boot stuff on board. So that's the way to go there.
And there is, I think, justifiable caution when you're offloading to a TPM. The TPM2 API is a relatively complicated one, to the extent that if you've ever worked with programming against TPMs, there's 3 levels of API to use. There's the actual low-level one that's defined in the spec, and then there are 2 layers of standardized ones for simpler tasks. And still with that, still just trying to follow best practices. There have famously been instances, for example, of popular Linux disk encryption implementation that has been used on x86 for full disk encryption, that it turned out was not quite implemented safely with the TPM. And if you just snooped on the I2C bus between the TPM and the processor, there was an attack possible. Yep. It's possible to design those protocols so that they aren't subject to those attacks, but still.
We have one question left, and then I think we have done our duties. From Sequality Software from Austria. Hi, Stefan, I guess. Meeting CRA requirements is one thing, but isn't it a problem that the same CRA rules and fines are put on big corporations and small little startups? Do we kill innovation? There is a little bit hope that the fines and regulations will be a little bit different for small companies and for big companies. So there are some formulations or some articles or sentences which make a difference between small and medium-sized business and the other ones. And there is a chance that it will be a little bit easier on smaller companies, but there's nothing yet decided. So
I have 2 answers to that. One, I think I'll approach it from, let's say, a regulatory realist perspective. If you look at the GDPR, you can publicly track all GDPR judgments and fines that are issued, and the GDPR is similar. As you were complaining earlier, Burkhard, it doesn't matter your own website that you're not trying to make money off. You're subject to the same regulations. But if you look at the actual fines under the GDPR, the vast majority of GDPR enforcement actions end up being for very small amounts, a couple €100 for somebody, or, no fine and just a warning. A company acknowledges it and corrects the mistake, and then everything is fine. I expect that we will see this also for CRA fines, especially in the early years.
It actually says in the CRA that the fines must be proportional to the size of the company.
Yes.
So
the size of the company, the turnover of the company, and the severity of the infraction. So I think there's that. And I think that's an important part of it. And also that's a real reason to follow Burkhard's advice and make sure that from the very beginning you build in your over-the-air software update system, so that if there is a problem, you have the capability to address it. And that goes from making sure you can update the bootloader and every component of your system, not just your application. And then on the other side of it, I'll again put on my Toradex hat, and I think we try to provide small to medium businesses solutions like this out of the box. You don't necessarily have to do everything customized, bespoke, complicated. You can start with a Toradex SOM and Horizon OS and Horizon Cloud, and without investing, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of euros, you can get a fully CRA compliant system fairly quickly. You said once something that I thought I really liked as a description of what Toradex does, Burkhard. And I'm not sure if you remember this, but I remember you saying one time, Toradex doesn't really sell system on modules. We try to sell solutions on a module. We try to make it. we try to make it really easy for people to get started. And from my seat as a security expert and somebody who's really cared about specifically software supply chain security for a number of years, it was the reason I joined Toradex. We do everything out in the open. We make all of our stuff open source. Our Meta Toradex security layer, we've gotten questions from you, Burkhard, about how to apply that layer to some other manufacturers' modules at some point in the past. So we really do try to put all this stuff out there.
Didn't succeed in that, so spent a lot of time, but it didn't really work. And I think the reason was the Linux kernel of the other SOM maker wasn't new enough. So.
So that's something that I think we do pretty well at Toradex and have as part of our core values, making this stuff accessible to everybody without, we're not here trying to get 10, 20, 30,000 euro consultation fees from you. We're here trying to make sure that if you're using a Toradex SOM, that you have the smoothest possible road to production and getting a secure device out there. And I think we are out of time here, so I will just say thank you so much to Burkhard for joining us today. It was a really interesting conversation, as it always is. And you can and should read his newsletter on Substack, Better Built by Burkhard, which I believe is at burkhardstubert.substack.com. And your website is embeddeduse.com.
Embeddeduse.com.
Yes. So if you need trouble navigating any of this stuff, maybe you didn't choose a Toradex SOM for some reason and you need somebody to help you with the things that Toradex doesn't do, or maybe you need somebody who's really familiar with Linux Qt UIs in general. Do contact Burkhard. He's one of the best out there.
But if it's not Toradex SOMs, you have to pay for more gray hair.
Fair enough. Thank you again, Burkhard.
Thanks a lot for listening. Thanks,
Thank you
Jon.
to everybody who's listening in.
Have a great weekend.
You too.
Everyone.